Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as Israel continues to wage war in the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip, we need to remember that 72 days ago, on October 7th, some 1,200 individuals were murdered in a brutal massacre perpetrated by the Islamist terror groups in the Gaza Strip, led by the Hamas. This terror organization, along with other terror affiliates, have also wounded over 4,800 individuals and kidnapped some 245 people, including women, men, elderly, children, and infants. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, for the last 71 days, we have communicated time and again that 1,400 individuals were brutally massacred during the October 7th attack, and therefore, just recently, they announced that it is 1,200 with the identified bodies all accounted for. Nevertheless, where's the deficit of the 200, which they initially stated and have maintained for quite some time?
So from the very first day, there were doubts about the forensic identification of several, perhaps dozens or even hundreds of the victims. And it turned out that there is certainty only regarding some 1,200, with the rest who were indeed killed, probably some of those Hamas perpetrators who were then blocked and killed by the security forces. So just to be on the safe side, rather than exaggerate the number, Israel now prefers to say that at least 1,200 were killed, and there are some people who are still missing, and you cannot find a comparable body or remains to make sure that they are the victims. Now, as for the fighting itself, Israel is facing at least 4 fronts in addition to the diplomatic arena. It has a problem in the Red Sea, if we start it from down south, and there will be news in the coming days as Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is coming to the region. He's coming to Israel, to Bahrain, to Qatar, and maybe to Kuwait, where the Emir has passed away. And he is also flying to the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford in the Eastern Mediterranean in order to show support for the Navy and Marines there ahead of the holidays, because they were all hoping to be home for Christmas, but they have to stay here in order to contain the Gaza war from escalating. And we also have, of course, the Gaza war itself, where fighting continues. The Chief of General Staff, General Herzi Halevi, again, as he did earlier regarding October the 7th, said that he and the IDF are accountable for the tragic incident which took place the other day in Shujaiya, where some soldiers violated the rules of engagement and opened fire on hostages, waving a white flag and making other signals that they are not armed, not dangerous, and obviously not Hamas. And 3 of them were killed. In Judea and Samaria, again, the manhunt for Hamas and other Palestinian terrorists goes on. Hundreds have been swept in a dragnet. And in the Lebanese border, there were several incidents. Hezbollah launched anti-tank guided missiles and rockets. The IDF responded with aircraft, helicopters, UAVs, tanks, and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, on a visit to the front, warned, to be more exact, that if Hezbollah notched up one step, the escalation ladder, Israel will retaliate fivefold, which means that it will no longer be a war of attrition, but rather a full-scale war. And the diplomatic front, the Biden administration, we had National Security Advisor Sullivan. The Austin visit is upon us. We can talk about that later. And obviously, Austin is going to announce the formation of a multinational maritime task force to defend shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb area.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Oren. I think it's very important to highlight the fact that the Red Sea is international, and therefore there is an international issue here that needs to be contended with. And I'm glad to see the Americans responding to this issue by the terrorist group Ansar Allah, the Houthi-dominated organization, which is an Iranian proxy, conducting malign behavior throughout the entire region, but also in particular in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, which we do look at this issue ultimately from the prism of international shipping, and therefore this need to be dealt with. The second thing that I think is important to highlight is the fact that the rules of engagement are to be kept by all IDF troops operating in the Gaza Strip. We had a vibrant discussion about this yesterday. Nonetheless, I think it's very important to highlight, before every entry into every mission, IDF soldiers go through a briefing. During that briefing, rules of engagement are part of each briefing and are raised with each soldier. If something is not understood, it is highlighted time and again, and therefore the unfortunate situation there, the circumstance that occurred, which is truly tragic, which of course includes also many emotions raging throughout Israel and beyond. The rules of engagement need to be more fervently applied in all sectors of the Gaza Strip, irrespective of the fighting. And the Islamist Hamas terror organization, as well as its terror operatives in Gaza, are also utilizing this cynically in order to try and trap IDF soldiers in all kind of circumstances, knowing that they can cause troops to sometimes reconsider their activities, and there have already been casualties due to that circumstance, which also need to be learned. Let's now turn to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish. Thank you for joining us, General. I'd like to ask you particularly about the Gaza Strip from an operational perspective. Where are currently things within the various sectors that are currently progressing simultaneously?
Yeah. Well, you're right, Jonathan. Simultaneously, this is the word that should be used, because Israel, or the IDF, is basically in those areas that he wanted to be, I would say, after the pause. In the northern part of the Gaza Strip, the IDF is deepening his operations in the Sajaiya neighborhood, and you've talked about, both of you talked enough about what we have seen there 2 days ago. And Zaytun, this is another area, and of course Jabalia. So the IDF is there and continuously and deepening his efforts in those areas. We see again and again pictures that are coming out of those areas of the modus operandi that the Hamas terrorist organization are working. We saw lately a video coming out of one of the hospitals in the northern sector of the Gaza Strip, that within the incubators, the Hamas terrorists were hiding rifles and pistols and all kind of other ammunition. We saw another house that under the baby's bed there was a entrance to a tunnel. So we see again and again, those videos are continuously coming out. And of course, there is still a fight also during the days in those areas. We could say that in the northern part, the control is quite strong, but we are not yet in fully control, and the IDF is still working there. We have to remember that in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, after the pause, the IDF started his maneuver toward Khan Yunis, and now he's surrounding the city of Khan Yunis, and also there deepening his efforts fighting against the Hamas terrorist organization. We heard yesterday that an area called Beni Suhila was also occupied by the IDF soldiers. Some of the Hamas vacation villas are also were kept by the IDF, captured by the IDF soldiers, and a lot of ammunition, a lot of intelligence that was gathering there, and would help the IDF to continue the fight in the Gaza Strip. The other thing that I think it is important to highlight is the civilians. We didn't talk about it in the last few days, but we know that the way of fighting is still taking in consideration that there are civilians over there. Israel designated and humanitarian areas that civilians could go there in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and this is something that Israel continuously urged the civilians in the south part of the Gaza Strip also to evacuate themselves to those areas and to lower the number of casualties. And the last thing that I would say is that we also see some videos of humanitarian aid that is going inside the Gaza Strip. And we see that in some cases, the Hamas terrorists are basically stealing them from the civilians. And we see pictures of Hamas gunmen over those humanitarian trucks. And in other cases, we see that people are just jumping on those trucks, and everyone tries to take whatever he can, which means that the civilian control of the Hamas is weakening, and this is something that we also see.
Very important indeed. Let's now turn to retired Brigadier General Amnon Sofrin, who is the former Chief of Intelligence of the Mossad. Thank you for joining us, General. I'd like to ask you about two particular things. The first thing is in the last week and a half, there were a number of incidents in which the Prime Minister's office released statements on the behalf of the Mossad in which it highlighted that the Mossad managed to avert an attack in Cyprus, one attack, and also in Denmark, where there was a ring of roughly 7 Hamas terror operatives who were subsequently apprehended, 2 of them, of course, also in Germany. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree is this more of a global war, since we do see Iran trying to exploit the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas in order to also exacerbate various theaters around the world?
Let me begin with a short description about the Iranian war in this war. Iran, for the last couple of years, is brokering this multi-arena confrontation with Israel. That means that they're responsible for coordinating the attacks coming out by Hezbollah from the northern front. Second one is the Syrian arena, where we have pro-Iranian militias coming out from Syria and from Iraq, deployed in the southern part of Iraq, and engaging Israel from time to time. They even launched a UAV to Eilat, which hit one of the schoolhouse. Fortunately, it didn't cause any damage, but they managed to launch it above the Jordanian territory into Israel and off to Eilat. And they, from time to time, launch rockets into Israel without any success so far. The third issue is the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. They're trying to encourage them to launch many attacks into Israel, just like they planned in advance. But lucky for us, the IDF is succeeding in containing all these efforts and neutralizing a lot of terror groups, and by that keeping us in a relatively quiet and calm atmosphere on this area. They failed to encourage the Palestinians who live in Israel, the Arab Israelis, to get out to the streets just like they did 2 years ago. And now they don't cooperate, and they keep on in a very low profile. And of course, we have the Houthis, meaning Ansar Allah from Yemen, who control the western part of Yemen. And from that, they control the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And they hit any ship trying to get into Israel, and they praise themselves that they succeeded blocking shipment going into Israel via the Red Sea. Now, Hamas didn't have any infrastructure outside, just opposite to Hezbollah. Hezbollah had a very good infrastructure outside, and they managed to carry out attacks on Israelis, on the Israeli targets and Jewish targets abroad for several times. And of course, remember what happened in Argentina twice following the assassination of Abbas Musawi, the former head of Hezbollah, the former leader of Hezbollah. Now, Hamas didn't have any good infrastructure outside, but they began enforcing their efforts in two dimensions. The first one is in Lebanon. They now have a very good presence in refugee camps, mainly around Saida and Tyre, where they launch rockets into Israel in coordination with Hezbollah, and are engaging the Israelis both together with Hezbollah and trying to infiltrate from time to time, and we managed to deny that. And the second issue is to try to launch attacks on Israelis or Israeli targets outside, just like they did right now in Denmark, in Germany, and in Cyprus before this event. So they try to make any effort to hit us, mainly not just engaging us in Gaza, but to enforce and to enlarge the confrontation between Hamas and between Israel to other areas that, let's say, from the Lebanese territory is more successful, and abroad, still they don't have a very good infrastructure, so they failed. And of course, this is a coordination and cooperation between our security service, the Mossad, and within the secret mechanism in these countries where these people were arrested. And they, of course, succeed in transferring the information, pointing out exactly who the people are. And of course, the local security forces are carrying out the arrests. And of course, they will try them, not us.
Indeed. Well, of course, it's important also to highlight that there is a very robust collaboration, cooperation, and coordination at times between the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad and its counterparts throughout Europe, including also the Five Eyes around the world and other intelligence agencies that are working day and night to ensure that terror elements do not exploit any weak points and are able to guarantee the security of their respective nations, of their respective citizens, and so on. Mr. Oren, adjacent to that, there is also an ongoing effort, as you already mentioned, Mossad Director David Barnea meeting with the Qatari Prime Minister. What can you tell us about that meeting, and to what degree can we expect a resumption? General Gavish mentioned preparing the ground before another pause, potentially. Are we heading in that direction?
Yes, we probably are. And as General Sofrin mentioned, and you elaborated on it, even when the political echelons in various governments do not have the best of relations, the professionals in the intelligence, security, military services, and law enforcement on either side, they usually have very good ties, which help them in times of need. And Israel right now is certainly in such a time of need. And the Mossad chief, in this case, Barnea, has a good relationship with his Egyptian counterpart, Abbas Kamel, and other people around the region, in the Gulf countries and beyond. Even in Turkey, where President Erdogan is not the most ardent fan of Israel and of Prime Minister Netanyahu, Mossad and MIT keep their very warm and professional relations. So apparently, over the last 2 weeks, after the fighting resumed in Gaza on December the 1st, Mossad was on that part of the professional echelon advising the cabinet, pushing for renewing the negotiations through Qatar, through Egypt, through the United States with Hamas. And some ministers were against it. Even today, Minister of Finance Smotrich, who is also a minister, not the minister, but a minister in the Ministry of Defense, indicated that he is quite indifferent to the fate of the hostages if it contravenes the fighting itself, trying to get the war aims. And Mr. Barnea apparently met with the Prime Minister of Qatar, who is calling the shots there. And there will be negotiations, even though Hamas tried to put some prior conditions, such as halting the fighting altogether and withdrawing Israeli forces before they talk about a new deal. This is bravado. Hamas needs the deal no less than Israel does. They will accept the pause, the new pause, when the negotiations start, not before it. And we will probably see over the next few weeks a new deal, or as it is now called, a new beat in the deal, again, releasing some Palestinian prisoners in exchange for Israeli hostages. And what Hamas really needs is the ceasefire itself in order to refresh and recuperate before the fighting resumes once again.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. I'd like to immediately turn to General Gavi, since we don't have very much time, and ask you to provide us the latest update also on the Lebanese front. Both Mr. Oren and General Sofrin mentioned the successes that Hezbollah has managed to achieve, unfortunately, from Lebanese territory. And therefore, I'd like to ask you, since the fact of the matter is Hezbollah is a long arm and inseparable from the Islamic Republic of Iran, is there a manner in which Hezbollah can be pressured enough via pressure of its patron, namely the Iranians, in order to change the equilibrium to a certain degree?
Well, we know that strategically the Hezbollah is controlled by the Iranian, but we know also that the Hezbollah have some his own interest in Lebanon, and he is kind of balancing between the two. But I think that with regards to to what we see today and to the war that we are into, this is for sure something that there are very tight discussions between the two of them. And if the Hezbollah would move to the next phase or would go to a full-scale war, this would be something that for sure would be done together with the Iran decisions that would be done together with the Iranians. So until now, we continuously see those insurgents. We see that we are still under the full war threshold. You were saying that there were some successes. So yes, today We saw an anti-tank missile that was shot toward one of the towns near to the borders in Israel, and it hit an auditorium. But we also have to remember that the majority of those, I would say, insurgents coming from the Hezbollah side, the majority of them, he fails on them. Most of the rockets that he was shooting, were intercepted. Most of the UAVs and a lot of the anti-tank units that were operating over the Hezbollah terrorist units that were operating over there were hit by the IDF, some of them even before doing what they were planning to. But yes, sometimes there are success. We always say that defense is not hermetic, and this is the combination of asking the civilians to go down to the shelters, and by this way we are lowering the number of people that are being hit in this area. But yeah, I think that strategically we have to go back and say that I don't think that this war would end as we started it with regards to the northern border. It was stated by the leaders here in Israel. This is the vast understanding of the Israeli, I would say, population. No one would allow those more than 60,000 people that were evacuated from their houses to go back to their houses on the same situation. And I don't think that they would be willing to come back. So something would have to be changed. We know that there are discussions about 1701, the UN resolution, and there are, of course, the two ways of dealing with it, the diplomatic way from one side and the military way from the other side. We know that Israel is prepared to all the options. Also, by the way, if something would happen in immediate term, if for some reason the Hezbollah will decide to start a full-scale war, Israel is ready to it. Still, the majority of reserves that were recruited during this are looking toward the northern part of Israel. Still, the majority of the Israeli Air Force capabilities and the wings are looking toward the north. So Israel is fully ready for something that would start in immediate trend, but also if something would be needed to be done in more, I would say, medium to long term.
Thank you, General Gavish. I think it's important to note that Hezbollah has already confirmed that 101 of its terror operatives have been killed since October 7th, of course, without going beyond the war threshold, as General Gavish always notes. But let's turn now to General Soflin, since we don't have very much time left. And I'd like to ask you particularly, since before the Mossad director Barnea left for Europe to meet with the Prime Minister of Qatar, he met for an extensive meeting with the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Thursday evening, during the course of which the Iranian question was deliberated at length. What can be done at this moment in time in order to guarantee that the Iranians do not take a decision to break through on the nuclear file?
First of all, the situation right now between Iran and between us and, of course, the Western world is quite complicated for two main reasons. The first one, Iran made a huge advance during the time, or since President Trump walked out of this agreement that was signed on 12/15, and that means that the Iranian succeeded in enriching uranium up to the level of 60% degree, which is very close to 90%, which is what we call the military capability, enough to produce the materials for a bomb. And that means that they control the full scale of what we call the fuel, the nuclear fuel cycle. Yeah. And they control the whole area. They know they have the knowledge, they have the facilities, which are all safe, and none of them was touched except from one, which now they rebuild it in a new way, which is in another place, in a reactor that is called, in a place called Iraq. And that means the Iranians are now feeling very safe because of another reason, that they have a strategic relationship today with Russia and with China. Now, it's not that they are dependent on China or Russia. They look today at Russia like looking at eye to eye, the same level, because we assist you, we launch, we assist you with UAVs, with suicide kamikaze UAVs, with maybe missiles and other elements to assist you fighting in Ukraine. And now you have to pay us back. And of course, they are going to pay back. They are going to say to deliver to Iran, advanced fighters, of very, very advanced ones. And of course, both of them are now engaged in a strategic level of strategic relationship. And they feel very safe, and they feel, of course, the fact that they went into an agreement and renewed the diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia, and of course the fact that they succeeded bringing President Assad from Syria into the Arab League and other elements, they feel very safe in the Middle East as well, and they are feeling now very strong, and that's very dangerous for us, because they might think that this is an opportunity not just to engage Israel, but to be able to break through and go into a nuclear device, which I don't think, personally, I don't think that this is the right time for them. And they will be very careful to handle such an issue, because they understand the implications and the reaction of the full world, or of the whole Western world, to that kind of activity. And but still, they feel today very safe, very untouchable, and they coordinate the whole confrontation against Israel from all arenas together, and with a very successful results so far. And that's it.
Thank you, General Sofrin. I'd like immediately also to thank General Gavish and Mr. Oren, since we have run out of time. But I'd like also to thank all of you at home. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.